So I finished up The Journeys North, the Pacific Coast Trail by Barney Scott Mann. Um, I don't know. I found it all right. It's typically not a book that I would get into too much, um, but I did enjoy this a little bit because it's been different from the books that I've been listening to lately, um, and it was more about the actual like trail, um, like a journey on the trail itself than like people pushing like training programs or anything like that, or just stories of themselves running roads. This was actually about um, a journey on the Pacific Crest Trail, um, basically centered around like six people, um, their journey from Mexico to Canada, going through the different states and stuff like that. Little things um, that happened along the trail, meeting new friends, um, maybe some strategy here and there, what went on, things that they enjoyed, seeing people struggle, and they talked about like how they struggled, like nutrition wise and like foot wise, the different things like that that happen on such a long, couple thousand mile journey when you're doing one of those really long hikes on one of those really long trails. When I say I really don't get into stories like this because it just centered more on like the six people and their interactions with others instead of talking about um, the trail. When I say the trail, I mean like how hard the trail was this section by this section, um, and like talking about the hills and climbs like this and that. It was more centered around the life of the six people, um, and the interactions that they had, and their like their family life, their friends, and stuff like that, like their little backstories. So it was more like um, six little stories within um, a major story, if that sounds right. It's hard to explain, and sometimes it was a little bit hard to follow because there was so many different like names being thrown out throughout the book. So you really had to like pay attention to like which person he was talking to and what that person did so far within the story. Because most of the time, it wasn't just like a quick interaction. It was they bump into this person now, then they bump into him later, and so forth. So you had to remember like the backstory at different points in time, even though it's still centered around like the six people, and the things that they were going through specifically. Um, I know like one time, for example, they walked up on somebody who was getting like life lighted out um, off the Pacific Coast Trail, and another time they were talking about uh, their feet hurting and getting the wrong shoes, and having to buy new ones even though they just bought new ones, and then digging some shoes out of the trash for some insoles and little things like that, that made it a little bit more interesting to me than I think like a story like this normally would. Um, it just might have been the type of book I was in the mood for at the time, but I think the author did a really good job trying to keep you on track, except for the names and stuff like that. Because when you do these long hikes, um, these long through hikes, you always get like a trail name. So sometimes they're a little bit goofy and like red, like well, I don't know what I can't remember all the ones that they use, but we'll just say like red beard or like untied shoes or something like that. Um, those weren't in the book, but like just an example, like just random words like strung together. Um, so sometimes you hear those words and it doesn't really um, spark anything in your brain when it becomes like an actual person's name, like who they're referencing. Um, so you just have to be cognizant of that a little bit. Um, but overall, I did enjoy it. It took me a little bit longer to finish um, than I'd like, but that probably drug it out a little bit, made it a little bit weaker because it took me a couple weeks to finish. But overall, I did enjoy it because it talks actually about like the Pacific Coast Trail and like a journey on it. Um, Most of the time, the books that I read are like on the East Coast, like the Appalachian Trail and stuff like that. So it was just nice to hear a different perspective on a different trail and things that they went through on that trail. Like talking about like maybe diverting because of fires, and at one point they had to backtrack because of snow. Um, like I think it was like 20 or 30 miles. They actually had to backtrack and get rides into town because of too much snow, and then somebody actually had to um, have a rescue sent for them because they didn't get checked in. But they were actually all right. They weren't really lost. It was just um, people didn't see them for a couple of days and they got worried, so they sent out like a search and rescue for them. So um, like little stories like that within the story just made the book a lot better than your typical like running book that you run into. So it was pretty nice. I mean, I would recommend it if you get a chance. I mean, it wouldn't be the top of my list, but it's definitely in the middle. So if you get a chance, I would check it out. Let me know what you think.